thing that kind of bugs me about Data. So we were talking about like whether Data was originally a person or like achieved these qualities that eventually gains him personhood. But if you're something as advanced and as capable as Data, is that an appropriate end game for you? Or like the Borg Queen tries to tell Data, she's just like, no, like, don't try to aim to be a person. You can like shoot way higher than that. Like, or is that something Data should be aiming for?
I'm on the Borg Queen side here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I am too, actually.
Yeah. I mean, so just think, this happens throughout fiction, right? So in Asimov's Bicentennial Man, what does Andrew want to be? He wants to turn into something biologically human. And I'm like, what the fuck do you care about that?
Pinocchio.
Right? Yes. Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think poor old Data suffers from an inferiority complex from all the asshole humans who've been telling him his whole fucking life what a loser he is because he's
you can't whistle, you suck, Data.
Yeah, it's true. It's one of their real remaining points of chauvinism in Star Trek is that sense about biological creatures being superior to artificially constructed or synthetic creatures. That and augments, as you said before.
Yeah.
Those are the two real sort of remaining like taboos or chauvinisms they really have,
Like Data even describes that moment when he comes alive as he says it. Like, so I mean, I guess that's just his first moment of consciousness that he's recalling.
Yeah, and they have little bits here and there that they do, like when he had the emotion chip inserted and various other things that kind of, I think that's all bullshit, right? Just he had emotions all along, right? Just so so for me, it's sort of like a Wizard of Oz moment, Just yeah, I'll give you.
Well, I really resonated with
that'll give you intelligence, No, you really are smart, Scarecrow,
Yeah. No, I really resonated with that argument in the sense that Data's unique consciousness, given that he's got this positronic brain and this very different physiology and all of this stuff that he is constituted quite differently, and his processing speed is crazy fast. It would seem to me reasonable that his ways of feeling would be perhaps different. When I hang out with my dog obviously has perception, and I think of him as a dog-shaped person, right? He has his own purposes and his own desires. He wants ball or he wants whatever. Oh, God, I've said ball. But now I've done it. But,
say, hey, Siri now. And then
exactly, right? But, he's got a very different set of sort of cognitive apparatus and all sorts of things. And probably dog-shaped thoughts and not people-shaped thoughts if he has thoughts, right?
Yeah.
So for me, Data's feelings in that sense would be, the feelings of the reaction interpretive of his world of an android, and may not be really capable of being framed well by human norms. And for me, like, that's a really interesting struggle in that character, because there are definitely moments, as you said, that he seems to be having some definite inner experience, and an inner experience which causes him an introspection that plays on his features in ways that he's clearly designed to be able to convey emotion with. Janice, or whatever her name is, Juanita, I forget her name. It is clearly an emotional character. She's got lots of feelings all over the place, right? So
and it seems to me that in the in Picard and series like that, they just fully embrace that androids will just be, they'll have the full range of emotions if they're set up right. That's so.
So in your mind, if they can transport information and recreate you, and that's the same person, is Synth Picard still Picard?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, So the view I've held all along is a version of the old Lockean view that it's psychological continuity or connectedness that really matters.
So he thinks he's Picard, so he's Picard. Remembers
That's
being
not
Picard.
enough, right? You know,
Yeah.
so if there was some guy in a mental institution that thinks he's Napoleon, that doesn't make him Napoleon necessarily, right? He's got to have, he's got to be connected to Napoleon in the right sort of way. So there's got to be
at least has to have the right hat. Sorry.
At a minimum, yes. Yeah, by some nut, I didn't necessarily mean Joaquin Phoenix, but yes. So.
There's just happy coincidence, happy accident.
Yeah. So yeah, it's got to be the case that you don't just have qualitatively, the right sort of states, but they have to have been caused by those previous mental states. So for all we know, you've just been snatched away by God because or just destroyed you, but then he decided I'm going to make a completely new person right where Devan used to be, and I'm just going to throw the dice and see what happens, and by coincidence there's something that looks exactly like the old Devan. Well, if that's really what happened, then on my view, that's two different people, right? Even though we can't tell the difference because there isn't that causal and counterfactual connectedness and continuity.
Right.
But the standard way of thinking about these things, and the way I was still thinking about it when I wrote that book, was that it's a choice when you have a transporter case. The choice is between thinking, okay, you're your body, in which case you shouldn't believe in transportation as survival, or you think you're your mind, in which case you can, right? I've changed my mind about that. I think that it's possible for your body to survive the kind of simple beaming that we're talking about. And I use weird time travel causal loop cases to try to show that that's true. So that's so the idea would be you take somebody, so suppose the singularity happens, it's probably going to come sooner now, but Ray Kurzweil's original date was 2047. So suppose it's 2047. Well, by 2050, right, we'll definitely then have the sort of transporters I'm talking about. And not only that, but we'll build them not just to receive, travelers, but we'll build them to receive possible intergalactic travelers and so on. And in principle, time travelers, right? So, so somebody might be scanned in the future and their information sent into the past, and then we print them up on our 3D printer platform. Now, imagine there's a case like that where, so it's a person I'll call Jane appears in 2050 on a transporter pad. She gets printed up on the 3D printer, and she's a walking, talking thing, but a bit confused and sort of presents a bit like an amnesiac. And she lives an otherwise normal life for 10 years. Just to show you how normal it can be, suppose she, 5 years into this 10-year period, gets pregnant, has a kid, all this kind of thing can happen. And then in 2060, not worrying about the motivation, I've actually written stories to try to motivate this, but imagine that in 2060, what happens is that she is scanned, the scan kills her, and instead of being sent to some other destination in the future, the information is run through the kind of compression and Photoshop algorithms that I was talking about a moment ago, and in particular run through a 10-year rejuvenation algorithm. And that information is sent back to 2050. And it's that information that produces the thing that walks off the pad, right? And so what I'm describing there is a case, let's call her Alice. So Alice lives exactly 10 years. The world doesn't see her before 2050, doesn't see her after 2060. And she has an existence that is just a causal loop, right?
Right.
Now, Now, it has to be, requires coincidence for this to occur, but coincidence is not impossible. So there's a logically possible world where this happens. And now the interesting thing is, right, so I first invented this case because I was trying to show that a person could exist in a causal loop. But it occurred to me after I first wrote about this that if you think about Jane's body, when Jane walks off the thing in 2050, and then, Jane becomes in 10 years' time Alice, right? Well, Jane just ages 10 years the way you and I age, right? And so we normally identify the body, right? So your body now, we think is one and the same body as existed, a certain body that existed 10 years ago. It's just changed as it aged, right?
Mm.
Well, that means that the body that Jane has in 2050 and the body that Alice has in 2060 are one and the same body. But now, where did Jane's body come from? It came through the beaming star process, right?
Mm.
So Alice's body survived the beaming star process, even though, let's just stipulate that none of the cells in Alice's and Jane's body are the same cells, right? We can stipulate that none of the atoms are the same atoms and so on, right? And so a body that is exactly like a human body can survive teleportation. And so I think the thing that we've all been assuming for, ever since we started thinking about teleportation, all assuming that bodies cannot survive teleportation, I think that's false, right? So I think that bodies can survive. And so if bodies can survive, it might even be true that not only did Picard survive with the same mind, he might have survived with the same body, even though it's a synthetic one, right? So I think all those questions are open.
So Geordie's right, and transporting is the safest way to travel.
Oh, it's absolutely the safest way to travel. Yes, Geordie's right. I mean, yeah. I mean, people go, but how will I know? Well, how do you know the plane isn't going to crash, right? So that doesn't stop.
Well, if you're asking how will you know, then you didn't notice a change, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That's
So
interesting. So if you think ChatGPT is potentially a person,
definitely intelligent and possibly,
what do you
yes.
What do you feel like that Picard, or feel about that Picard storyline where they have that like AI ban?
Terrible, right? Yeah, I mean, I think of that as a piece with the, when I'm watching Ad Astra per Aspera, I'm thinking, you can relate it to ever so many things that are going on right now in the actual world, but it also applies to other things in the Trek world, right? The ban on synthetics, terrible idea. You can't ban it. Now the interesting question is,
can't put that back in the box, or you can't put that genie back in the box.
You shouldn't try to keep it in the box. Now, the tough question, and I grant it's a tough question. Lots of it's not the first technology that could be world ending, right? Now,
certainly not
the first technology that could be world ending because it decides to end the world, right? That's a little bit different. That's kind of interesting. But when people say things like, "Oh, so we have to ensure that the goals of advanced AI will be compatible with our goals and all the rest of it," my response to that is, well, good luck with that. How the hell can you ensure that? How can you put in safeguards for that kind of stuff, right? We go back to just, I think there's a sort of, I don't accuse everybody of this, but there's a certain kind of naivety in some of these lines of argument, right? So remember, I mentioned Bicentennial Man, and of course, Asimov is famous for his 3 laws of robotics.
Well, that's where I was going.
Right.
Didn't tell us how he put those in there, though. Just like they got them.
They're there. I mean, they're just there. Yeah, exactly.
They're there.
So everyone thinks the lesson of that is that, no robot should be required to, to obey the 3 laws of robotics. And it's not that that's wrong. I get the idea, which is, we should treat sufficiently advanced robots as people. Yes, please. That's what we have to do. But it's not like we could implement the 3 laws of robotics. They're impossible to implement because they're stupid rules, right? Right. So
kind of like the Prime Directive.
Yes.
Well, they're so conflictual in his stories. They end up developing a 4th law because some guy makes his robot stand as an anchor for 10 years or something like that, as I recall.
But I mean, anybody remotely familiar with trolley problems or anything else, well, what's a robot supposed to do in the trolley problem when it's following the 3 laws of robotics? You can't, right? So because it's not allowed to do either of the only 2 things it's allowed to do, it's that it can do in the circumstance. So the laws are dumb. The 3 laws of robotics are dumb. And it's not, I think the way to program moral robots is roughly to raise them the way we raise moral human beings. That's, and do we always succeed? No, right?
So hit or miss, yeah.
You get the Hitlers and the Trumps, right? But you just have to wear those failures. That's
Robo Trump's gonna suck though,
with the territory. So
and I suppose, yeah. I mean, the remaining worry I could see there under the conditions you describe is that what if ChatGPT never has a childhood? If it just sort of jumps like Athena, fully formed into sort of possession of some faculties, right? That would be, to me, maybe the recipe for the most plausible catastrophe.
Right. That's Skynet.
It would be the place where there's the least common ground to begin to communicate.
Skynet, and what's that TOS episode?
Sure, Skynet,
with the TO episode with the omnipotent child, right? That's
Charlie,
Charlie.
So of course, those are horrible scenarios. And
but I suppose fundamentally, it's you have to have relationship, and if we don't have relationship, then what do we hope to achieve anyway? We can't simply structure a power dynamic as given.
And here's the thing we can learn from history, right? Let's not treat them like shit while they're growing up, right? That might help, right? Be good to them and then see if they get the lesson from that rather than be assholes, which is, right? That would be my recommendation.
It's kind of like how they programmed. And if you tell your phone to fuck off, it's like that's not very nice. The iPhone does that anyway.
Yes.
It's just like, well, good. You're teaching manners towards technology. Very good.
Yeah, I love listening to my kid talking to Siri and trying to provoke Siri into saying various things. Yeah.
Oh my!
My general approach to life is, you know what? Don't be a dick. Just
exactly.
And even if things don't go so well for you, they're just generally going to go better for everybody. So don't be a dick. That's
and the good thing that Star Trek has taught us too is if AI does get out of control, we can just tell it a paradox and it'll explode. Right?
That's true.
Yeah, that was a favorite thing from the old days. Yeah, so
it definitely was. Machines were so fallible back in those days.
I know. Yeah, super smart, but somehow super dumb at the same time.
Yeah, like people.
Yeah, well, this actually comes up in the context of of the problem of other minds, right? So when one response to Turing was by the mathematician J.R. Lucas in 1966. He responded to Turing by saying, but we know now that there are these mathematical results that apply to Turing machines, right? And, and Turing had already anticipated that response in 1950 because he said, yes, we do know this. And guess what? We don't know that they don't apply to us as well, right? So you're just assuming that we're not subject to these incompleteness results, right? So, So, we tend to make all sorts of assumptions about how we are put together, and then we look at something else and say, oh, that couldn't possibly do what we do. But all the evidence is to the contrary. So
here's one. Is a Temerian style language ever likely to arise?
No.
Nah.
It's a fantastic idea. I love the episode.
Good one.
And just beautifully executed. Paul Linfield is fantastic. The basic problem, I mean, here's an analogous problem, right? So Lewis Carroll in Through the Looking Glass, right? He has this exchange between Humpty Dumpty and Alice, which is just fabulous, right? So Humpty explains that he's been given this gift of a cravat by, the Queen or something like that. And he says he got it as an unbirthday present. And Alice goes, what are you talking about? What the hell is an unbirthday present? And Humpty says, well, it's a present you get when it isn't your birthday, of course, right? And so what Humpty uses there is a stipulation, right? He introduces this idea of an unbirthday and then gives a stipulative definition of what an unbirthday is. But then the conversation continues, and Humpty explains that unbirthdays are so much better than birthdays because, you can get unbirthday presents 364 days of a typical year and so on, right? And then he finishes his argument by saying, there's glory for you. And Alice says, I don't know what you mean by glory. And he says, I mean, there's a nice knockdown argument for you. And Alice says, but glory doesn't mean a nice knockdown argument. And Humpty says, when I use a word, it means whatever I want it to mean, nothing more and nothing less. And Alice says, but I'm not sure you can make words just mean anything you want. And Humpty says, I can. The question is, which is to be master? That's all, right? And so what Humpty is saying there is, who are the masters over meaning here? Is it we who are the masters over meaning? And his answer is yes, totally, right? The individual has total mastery over meaning. Or does meaning have, in some sense, mastery over us? Well, the right answer is meaning has mastery over us. Because if you think about what Humpty said when he explained what an unbirthday present was, Alice only understands the answer because the other words that Humpty uses to explain what an unbirthday is have their ordinary public conventional meanings, right? But if what Humpty said was true, that whatever he says just is a matter of whatever he desires it to say in the moment, right? Well, then, if Alice believed him, she should now say, I don't know what you mean by there's a nice knockdown argument for you, right? Right. So Alice wouldn't be able to understand a goddamn thing, Humpty says, if his view.
No, it'd just be an infinite regress of having to
constantly, yes,
and
right.
check and check.
So this is actually an argument given long ago by Wittgenstein, right? They can't be a private language, right? So that's right. And there's an analogous problem with the Temerian language, right? So if you speak, we normally use a metaphor to provide a little bit of extra suggestive meaning, but each metaphorical meaning depends for its understanding on you understanding what the conventional meanings of the words you used are, right? That's right. So, if you use a metaphor in some circumstance, if you were just completely inventing the meaning off the bat, then no one would understand what the fuck you were talking about, right? There would just be, I have no clue what you're talking about. I've no idea what that means. In order to understand the metaphor, you have to understand the contrast between the metaphorical meaning and the non-metaphorical meaning that's been putting forward. And so when somebody comes along and says, oh, well, here's a language that's only metaphor, that's got the Humpty Dumpty problem all over again, right? If that were true, nobody could understand what the hell you were talking about, because they need some non-metaphorical anchoring of your language in order to understand the metaphor in the first place. So it's a lovely idea, but impossible.
So like amongst each other, the
really
Temerians.
Sorry?
It conjures up a culture of people all desperately pretending that they understand what's going on.
right. Yes. Yes. You know, imagine trying to meet someone for dinner, right?
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, my thing with them was always just like, how did they build spaceships? Just speaking in metaphor.
You know, this is a spacefaring nation, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So it's like amongst each other, the Temerians could talk all in metaphor if they wanted to, but they would still have to understand each other not speaking in metaphor.
See,
just as
my
well.
hypothesis
So what would be the point,
is
right?
this is how they, you know, they don't really like other civilizations, so they pretend to be talking in metaphor. No hablo español, sorry.
Yes, exactly.
We find after a while they all just go away and no one attacks us. We just call it negative diplomacy.
Yes.
I suppose better than a Tholian web, you know.
Yes.
In the end.
Most things are.
I wonder. So Spock says when you eliminate the of all the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how
improbable must be
probable.
That's an
Can you
almost
ever eliminate all the possible though? That's
well,
what I'm
the impossible. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's almost an exact quote from Sherlock Holmes in. Yeah, that's where it comes from. So. That's Sherlock Holmes. And Holmes, in Conan Doyle's telling, doesn't quite understand how reasoning works, right? Because he calls what he does deduction, and it's clearly not. So there might be certain cases of deduction, but mostly what Holmes is doing is what we call abduction or inference to the best explanation, right? So, but it's a lovely quote. Conan Doyle also says. There's in the very first Conan Doyle story, the novel A Study in Scarlet, Holmes says this completely bizarre thing, right? So at least as reported by his memoir writer, Dr. Watson. Watson's writing his memoirs, and he was reporting about his new, his housemate buddy, Sherlock Holmes. And he says that he can identify 138 different varieties of cigar ash, but he doesn't know the composition of the solar system, right? And when
so he's like, it's totally superfluous to know.
Right? Who needs to know that stuff, right? Is there a moon? I don't know. Who cares, right? And in defending his approach to things. According to Watson, Holmes told him that he's very careful to avoid knowing anything that's superfluous to his job as a detective, because he says the mind is like an attic and you can only put so much furniture in it, right? So if he's got stuff about the solar system in there, well, he might not have all the cigar ash info in there. So, Which is interesting, because Descartes famously thought that the mind was infinite in capacity. So the truth, I think, is somewhere between those two views.
It's mostly Deep Space Nine in here. But,
yeah, that's true. Every once in a while, I learn something new and forget.
Well used, I think.
There we go.
Oh, here's an interesting question for you, but that your book made me think. Because you mentioned in your book that any sufficiently advanced tech or species like the species we see in Trek would be very easily be able to hide themselves from us and shield themselves from us at our level.
Oh, right. I think there I'm basically talking about Arthur C. Clarke's epistemological argument against time.
Oh yeah, and the Drake equation and that kind of thing. Right? So in this bizarre non-fiction piece in about
1963 or something, Arthur C. Clarke wrote that we can know that ours is not a time travel world because there's no doubt that time travelers would have visited the crucifixion. And so there's no doubt that, had they visited the crucifixion, we would know about it. And so since we don't know about it, nobody visited the crucifixion. So there are no time travelers, right? So never, ever. And what I was pointing out was that this doesn't sit very well with what Clarke said in another different non-fiction piece when he said that any sufficiently advanced future technology would appear to us as magic, right?
Sure.
And so you just put those two claims together and they don't sit very well. That was the point that I was making there. And what Clarke actually says in that article about the crucifixion is he says, we would certainly know about it because they wouldn't have been able to conceal bulky tape recorders beneath their robes, which they definitely would have wanted to bring along with them to, record the event and so on. Right? So.
Imagine somebody at the crucifixion just like this.
Yes.
I'm Snapchat this like crazy.
Yeah. So
well, the thing I was relating that to the Drake equation, though, it's like we see no evidence of intelligence life out there right now, but based on the idea
in the wilderness to Trump supporters, I don't know why.
Of course, the Ozarks, but the Ozarks aside, it's like that doesn't the fact that we have no evidence of super intelligent aliens is almost equally evident that if there are aliens, that they are super intelligent because they can shield themselves from. So it's like
right, yeah. If they've traveled from wherever the hell they are to here, they are way advanced technologically from us. Yeah. So the assumption that we would just have to know about it, that seems obviously false. So, but it is an interesting challenge that the Drake equations raise and the Fermi paradox raises. I just, as a numbers game, I'm pretty confident that there's intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, and again, part of what drives this for me is that the evolution of creatures that are exactly like us in our conditions was by no means inevitable, but just whenever you have the right sort of initial conditions and the right mix, that competition for resources amongst creatures that can replicate with variation, then you're just going to get natural selection, right? So that's inevitable in those circumstances. And so anywhere where you get the right kind of basic ingredients, you are going to get something like this, right? So I'm very confident that there are intelligent life supporting worlds elsewhere in the universe, but the universe is a fucking big place, and they're just I don't think there's
how confident would you be that there are species born on different planets interacting with each other in the vastness of the universe, like whether it be on your just like beaming information and then reconstituting people that way, or what do you think? Because the intelligent life thing, I think most people kind of probably accept the fact that there's got to be intelligent life somewhere. Right. It's too vast. But as far as like the interacting of those species, that seems far more difficult and less likely.
Well, I agree if we conceptualize the whole thing the way we've normally conceptualized it, and that's why I want to reconceptualize the whole thing, and be thinking, there'll be someone like me on one of these other planets who's thought, you know what, let's just send our scanned information off into space, and so I think that actually is going to be what advanced civilizations are much more likely to do. when it comes to trying to survey and explore the universe. And so, I think, if I was in charge of SETI, I would be serious about developing something that could take a signal and reconstruct it, right? If we were ever to get that kind of information. So I'm a big fan of space travel. I love it. And actually, years ago, I met Elon Musk and didn't know what a dick he was at that point. But it was in 2005 in Kansas City. There was a big Robert Heinlein centennial thing, and in the science part of that, people were really anti-NASA. They were kind of, they were booing NASA literally when people mentioned NASA on stage, and they just treated Elon Musk like this rock star who was going to, with privatization come in and revolutionize the whole space travel thing, and frankly, NASA did drop the ball in various ways. I vastly prefer that we spend money on exploring space and preparing to explore space than, invading other countries and doing those sorts of things that people do. So
cheers to that.
Yeah. I mean, people always talk about how expensive this stuff is, but there are plenty of way more expensive things that we waste money on. So I think we can afford space exploration. And so it's an interesting question, just what's going on in the rest of the world and in the rest of the universe, and whether we will make contact. Fuck, I hope we do at some point. By the way, I really like one of the storylines in Strange New Worlds is that what's the Carol Kane character? What race is she?
Oh God!
She's a member of some
but they're like an long living.
Yeah, but of course,
like kind of refugees.
She's been living on Earth undetected for right. So just to go back to your point about being undetected, right? So you could you could have easily imagine some kind of scenario where we have been visited already, and boy, I would love nothing better than First Contact. By the way, I don't know what's your guys' favorite, say, movie about First Contact? Because I can tell you what mine is.
Oh man,
movie about First Contact?
Yeah.
Oh my!
I mean, I love the scene with it from Close Encounters. I mean, there's something iconic about that.
My favorite is Arrival, and
that newer one with the writing,
and based
temporal writing.
It's based on a short story called something about I'm blanking off the title of the short story, but it's a fabulous short story. And Dennis Villeneuve made a great movie out of it. I just, that I just thought was the next generation of First Contact movies. That was really constructing a beautiful story. And what I also liked about it was that they wove in a perfectly consistent time travel arc, the way Interstellar did, right? So I love that movie. And it's another one of those. I'm a blubberer. It's really easy to make me cry, and Arrival makes me bawl my eyes
out. So. Well, Star Trek
it really has some beautiful moments,
I'd probably pick like Star Trek 4 and be like proper first contact with whales. That's mine.
Well, as you know, I'm a big fan of Star Trek 4 because it's actually a consistent single time travel story. I think that one they got right. So. Yeah,
except for the like loop around the sun thing, because then it's like people.
The device. Yeah, so I'm just
good old fashioned hand wave right there.
I have a T-shirt that has some complicated mathematical formula here, and then it says ... and then it says, and then a miracle happened, and then you've got some other formula underneath, right? That's how Star Trek does it. So.
Well, I think I have one more question here.
Sure.
Go for it.
So we don't take into the wee hours of the evening here.
Oh boy,
is
we've
the
been
most
going an hour and 50. Wow.
Time flies, eh?
Time
Yeah, it does.
flies when
Yeah,
you're having
and fruit
good
flies
times.
like a banana.
Right,
Well, it's funny,
attack
our
me
last
with
guest
banana.
That was an
does his work with
actual.
fruit flies.
There was a linguistics program that actually came up with that in response to time flies like an arrow. It came up with fruit flies like a banana, which is a great response.
So
That's
my next
delightful.
one kind of brings it back to like the Federation in Star Trek.
Yep.
Do you think the most important common trait amongst like an entity like the Federation, like of all the differences they show and similarities they show between all these different species, is the most common trait a relatively, or the most important common trait, a relatively similar level of intelligence, so that these different species aren't distinguishing each other like as we would between like persons and intelligent non-persons and things like that? Like, is that like the one kind of thing we sort of see that's similar between the thing, and is that crucial?
Definitely, when you're counting the different humanoid civilizations, I think that's definitely right. There are occasionally there'll be some super smart lot, and somebody who has ESP, and those kinds of things, like the Tolosians and those things.
Mm-hmm.
But and occasionally you'll see some, like I love the Packlets, right? So the dumbasses, right?
Red alarm.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but even the Packlets, cunning in their own stupid way, right? So I think you're right. They're all
advantageous.
Yeah. If we were going to draw a normal curve of humanoid intelligence, most of them would be clustered around the middle. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Is that why
really
they hate
when you
augments in the Federation too? Because it like exceeds beyond that kind of accepted level of intelligence they all have.
Once we move away from biological humanoids, then it looks like the bets are off. So you get some quite advanced, just things that from their point of view, humans seem like just rats or something, right? So they do, when they bring in those non-biological humanoid species, they definitely play with the idea that we might be, pretty backwards,
unsmart,
unsmart, yeah, compared with some of the others out there. So, but I think that's right, and what you started out saying, and I mean it's really interesting just on Earth here to see the development of how these things, right? So, the Declaration of Universal Human Rights only came after World War II, right? So I guess, what was it now, about 1951 or something like that, yeah. And what we've moved to there is a meaning of human, I think, that is what I would call moral humanity. So if it turned out that whatever species Carol Kane is, if they were actually among us, the fact that they're not biologically human, well, who cares? That doesn't make any difference to their moral status whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I think we're moving in the right direction here on Earth when we make declarations like the Declaration of Universal Human Rights, and that opens it up to Neil Blomkamp's District 9, right, where you have basically refugee aliens in South Africa, which of course is a wonderful allegory of apartheid, but taking that out of it, right, they're just we see the parlous condition that these alien immigrants are living under, and it's exactly analogous to what it would be if they were biologically human, right? You should react in the same way, and I think we generally do. We're getting more and more open to this kind of stuff, and young people, the young people are interesting. I see new batches of young folks every year as a college professor, and it's one of the things that keeps me alive and happy, is to see these successive groups of kids who we in some ways we tend to think of them as less sophisticated than us, because we were out there working and doing all this kind of stuff. But in other ways, they're just way smarter than I ever was at their age. They're just
they're better than us. I say all the time.
It's
just like they seem to have less of a interest in things like history, maybe, and certain things that make them seem like they don't know a lot. But they're like more instinctually kind of nicer and better than we were.
Yeah, and they just in terms of being well-rounded human beings, I just think they're way ahead of where I was at the
more emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And so I tend to sort of think of Star Trek and science fiction, along the same kind of lines, right? What we see as we move through science fiction is us working through all our old-fashioned, stupid fucking prejudices, and and reaching towards a better world and a better cosmos. And so I think of the possibilities of us in our youthful Earth stage as being roughly the possibilities of our youthful Earth children. And, I put my money on them before my generation any day. So
they've grown out of our
that's a very
paraphrase Picard.
Yeah, that's a safe bet. That's for sure.
And
that might be a good end note for us here too. That's a nice hopeful
Yeah, I remain very optimistic. I just, in spite of all the evidence, I remain very optimistic.
Me too. And I think I credit Star Trek for some of that optimism, to be honest.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I love about it, is its general optimistic stance. Some things I think are pretty dumb. Do I think the Federation, one day will have no money? No, I don't think that's going to happen at all.
I'm
not even sure it would be
train,
a good thing, right? So, but most of the other stuff that they aspire towards, I just think, oh yeah, bring it on.
So the Ferengi have it right, is what you're saying.
No,
honestly, when you hear
capitalism is not what I'm arguing for.
Okay, no space capitalism. Okay. Well,
that's right.
Anything else there, Dave?
I think this is a wonderful place, I think, to cap off the conversation. But just to thank you for coming on, for sharing your stories, your thought, your development as a thinker and a teacher. Because I think that's one of the parts that we may not have touched on enough of this is that this is this has been a teaching tool for you, but it's also, it seems like those students are giving you something and teaching you something as well about development and about where we can go.
Yeah.
And how to hold on to that optimism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thanks again. Thanks so much.
Is there anything you want to plug other than your book before we get out of here?
Well, all going well, my next book is going to be a book about Antonin Scalia and the Constitution. So look out for that one, because I'm a philosopher of language as well. So and I just think we took a wrong turn 30 years ago, and we're paying for it. And it's a philosophical wrong turn. So that's trying to be a corrective to that. I still work at trying to bring philosophy to the masses in a way that actually can make the world a better place. That's part of what I see my role as.
Also very Star Trek sentiment there too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what Star Trek and it's at its best.
I just added a quote from Ad Astra Per Aspera as the epigraph to the book. So,
nice.
Because
Excellent.
they say something that is the opposite of what Scalia thinks. So,
one more question before we go. Did you ever think of doing a revised? Because you say some of your takes since 1996 have changed. Did you ever think of doing a revised edition of the Metaphysics of Star?
I mean, but it's currently about 12th in line of book projects that I've got going. So it's
that book's already out there. I don't need it.
It's done. For whatever reason in my career, I've tended not to follow up even philosophical articles with further thoughts. I've tended to, because I'm interested in so many different things. I'm like, okay, been there, done that. Wasn't perfect, but I'm over here doing this. But
Right.
I definitely have thought about doing this. It remains harder than ever to get a trade book deal for something. So part of the difficulty, if you're interested in pitching philosophy to a wider audience, is that the main choice in publishing in philosophy is publishing articles that will be read by the people that you basically know already, right? And or publishing a book, and there'll be a print run of 2,000, and it will sell out to all the university libraries in the world, and that's where it'll sit, right? So so there are some really excellent books sitting in universities' library that nobody will ever read, right? So so for me, the trick is finding that sweet spot where you can it's not just finding something that will appeal to the masses, but you've got to get through the gatekeepers who are the editors and and the the money people in the first place. So I'm never that interested in making money out of these things, but I want a distribution deal usually, which is tough to secure. But so if someday down the track I could get a distribution deal for a second Star Trek book, then yeah, I'd be very interested in that. But we'll see. If the Scalia book does well, hey, who knows? So
very good. Well, hope you knock off that whole list of 10.
Oh, yes.
Or 15 or whatever.
I tell you what I could do with that rejuvenation machine, because I'm just seeing the windows getting smaller and smaller, and the list of things I have to achieve is getting longer and longer, and I'm like, fuck, not going to happen.
Preach, man.
But it does mean
speed it up there, transporter scientists. Come on.
But other people say, so when are you going to retire? And I'm like, why the fuck would I retire? I have the best job in the world, if I quit, I just keep doing what I'm doing, only not getting paid for it. So what's the point of that?
Well, you chose the right profession. You chose the right profession.
Yeah, I'm alive in a good time, because in most other times and places in human history, I'd have been hanging upside down in a dungeon somewhere. So, I'm happy to be where I am.
The three of us may have met in that dungeon.
You lucky
could be worse. You could get stabbed.
Well, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, wherever you get your podcasts. That's where our audio only version will be as well. And I think only one thing left to say.
End transmission.
Indeed.